On this episode of the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, we've got our friend Lyle Griner in the digital house from Pure Ministry. He's going to share with us some ideas, some thoughts on Pure Ministry, where it came from, and why these ideas matter at camp. Welcome to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast, where we turn numbers into stories and data into insights. We dive deep into theology and research, paired with practical wisdom and action steps to help camping ministries thrive. I'm your host and producer, Jared Rendell, a camp enthusiast and part of the Sacred Playgrounds team. This podcast features Dr. Jake Sorensen, a scholar, author, practitioner, and the founder of Sacred Playgrounds. Be sure to subscribe, submit a question to us to be featured on the podcast, and click that support button to help make these episodes happen. Find us on Facebook and Instagram at Sacred Playgrounds or at sacredplaygrounds.com. Wonder with us what God might have in store at your sacred playground. Welcome to the playground, everyone. So Lyle's here today. So we've got a handful, like Sacred Playgrounds, we have a handful of connections with Lyle, one of our team members, Kelsey. Helps on Lyle's team in a lot of ways. So we're gonna let Lyle introduce himself. He's worked with a number of different camps through Pure Ministry, through his own connections. So we're gonna let him say hi, introduce himself, tell us about Pure Ministry and the heart behind it. So Lyle, thank you. I'll probably say it 6 times, but thanks for joining the playground, if you will, today.
All right. Well, thanks for letting me on the playground, I guess. And I appreciate that. And
everybody's welcome.
Right. So yeah, Lyle Griner, I've been working this Pure Ministry thing for a long time. And really the short history, it goes back to a school counselor, Barbara Varenhorst, Palo Alto, California. And as she would tell her story, she says, I just kept asking my students, who do you go to when there's something going on in your life or somebody else's life? And her observation was that nobody ever said, you, Barbara. They almost always talked about another young person being the first people they confided in or noticed or talked to. And so her premise is, why am I not giving my kids some skills, some caring skills, and just how to listen and how to help? So that became a statewide thing in California. She originally called it Pure Counseling. Said later on that she kind of regretted using the counseling word because it has all kinds of expectations that goes with it. But
sure.
Took off across the country. Peer helpers, natural helpers, peer mediation. Everybody, was building, using her stuff or building off of it. And churches started to come to Barbara and saying, gosh, we need this. So she started working Peer Ministry. Myself, a youth ministry fellow in the Twin Cities area, people would bring Barbara to town and I would go to her stuff. I'm obviously biased, but Jared, I loved where it was taking the kids that I was working with.
Right.
It was almost like, for me, it was almost like having a camp staff right in the middle of my church, and these kids that had just hearts, and they fit in wonderfully programmatically, but they started coming back and saying, oh yeah, I used some of those things on my sports team, or with a schoolmate or with one of my relatives. And so suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, they're starting to understand the church bigger than, just a program and just being there. So I've gotten to work this for a number of years and helping groups get started. And I'll tell a story in a little bit about, kind of the camp journey into this and what we're doing with that. That's my niche in the world, right? Giving people these people skills, these caring skills.
Awesome. I, as you were talking about that origin story, that key question at the very beginning, who do you go to? And who do you go to is really powerful. And it made me think, I don't know, maybe even it's a little in the world today. We've got whether it's like social media platforms or the groups that were built, like that's been enabled now in a lot of different ways where we've got systems and communities in place to enable that, to enable going to each other, to enable going to, right? My wife learned the most about being a mom from other moms. Right? When she went to ECFE or she went to this or she went to, and we've enabled that in lots of ways now. So that's really interesting to, the flip from, especially then when it was to like always going to sort of expertise or perceived expertise But this idea, and I think this, as you're saying, this is going to matter all the way down here to, to camp, to our staff, to our campers, where this is something built in us to go to each other, to connect with each other, to learn and to grow. And it flips our script a little bit from trying to always be the one who knows or the expert or whatever it is. And instead, we create space, we enable, and we build skills, to your point, which is really the heart of what's happened.
Right. I had an Episcopal friend the other day that said, the church, he said, the church really we're pretty good on the what's and the whys. But we're not always as good at the hows. And just said that, it's well, if I can, I got to sit down and have lunch with a fellow by the name of Brian McLaren. I'll name drop for a minute, but down in Florida. And we were sitting there and talking about what we do. And Brian says, yeah, he says, the bottom line of the church is always love. It's loving God, loving neighbor, loving, and he said, but how do we get at that? We preach it, we teach it, we sing songs about it. But he said, to what you're doing, and then he broke into this whole thing about yoga. And he says, it's like you go to this yoga class and you get there and you don't do exercises. There's no mats. You sit in rows and somebody talks about all the cool benefits of yoga. And then we sing songs about the downward dog and the upward cobra. You get the point. And he says, but we never get around to doing actual exercises in yoga. And of course, it felt good to me because, he said, he just made the point. He says, that's what you're doing with skills. He says, when you give people actual skills to practice, people skills that they can use, skills that are repeatable and doable, it becomes not only hearing the words, we're supposed to love our neighbor, but it becomes practical ways, that I can do this. And it's those little skill things that we get to do.
Yeah. Amen. All right. Well, we'll dive in a minute here on, translating some of that, bringing that to camp, bringing that to our staff, our campers, our families. Before we do that, we are going to do, and we just talked ourselves right into it, which works really well, this idea of skill building. So we're going to talk about those for a second and do our quick camp question.
Quick camp question.
Our quick camp question for the day is this, Lyle. A lot of camps are in the middle of recruiting season, and last year we built this thing about that idea, skill building, these skills, because we of course have said for our camp staff that these are important experiences and they're transformative, and you get to go take this summer to do this special set apart thing. Sometimes we view that, and we heard this a lot, and it's part of why we built this whole Camp Builds thing, because we had started to hear from college career centers that they weren't sure that these camp experiences were actually worth it, were actually valuable for things like our lives and our careers. They were this, semester abroad of sorts or whatever it might be that wasn't actually building things. And that's not what the research says. The research says camp builds skills, and those skills last. So you have worked with so many students, across generations, you worked with so many students and young adults through this work and your own connections. So I'm curious what you think, and you've had a lot of camp connection. I'm curious what you think is maybe the most impactful, influential, important skill that a camp staff experience can build. So that's the quick camp question. What's the most important life or career skill that camp staff experiences can build?
Wow. Right away, I go back to being a camp counselor, Camp Pewalu, Iowa. Well, shout out to them there. But right. And I look back on my life and I go, I really don't remember or have any connections with high school class friends, a couple here and there. I have a lot of connections with my camp friends and my camp counselor friends. And I look back and I go, oh my gosh, that's where for me personally, that's where I started to really understand theology. That's where I started to realize, the Bible is not just, a book with words on it. It's something that's lived. And I remember, during a summer and then going back to schools and going, gosh, everybody's so immature. And I just felt like I grew up those summers. A lot of it was that I was needed. I was needed for something really, I was entrusted with just some amazing tasks and a job with kids and trusted with things that nobody would have trusted me with, any other place. So a lot of confidence. And a lot of appreciation for those times. And that's where I grew up. I mean, that's really where I grew up, was, being those camp counselors. So, and I see that. I think, working with camp staffs and stuff like that is so fun to run into people and go, "Oh, I remember you came and worked with our staff," and years later even.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll tell me things that, we talked about and did. But so I don't know if it's one skill. It's a foundation for life. It really is, in so
Yeah, I
many
think you're
ways.
right. I think you're right. And I think those couple things that you mentioned, kind of the maturity, relationship building skills, and that confidence word, maybe as much as anything, are things that we've heard from people too. That confidence piece, especially, that was a really important skill that they built, because there was almost no other place where they're being entrusted to do things like that, and really aligns with, well, some of the how, to your point a little bit ago, how this relational ministry, this peer ministry, can work, right? Because we're being entrusted to do these things, not just be trained, not just learn, not just be passive, not just receive all the time, but do and act, right? Camp is built on experiential learning, and so this fits really well. Thanks for that quick camp question answer. A lot of that helps. I think you're right. Okay, so let's dive in here a little bit. These really key things, around peer ministry, the idea behind it, and then as we start to bring that um, to camp, we've got these audiences at camp. We know the research is telling us that things like the support that we give them, the community that they build, and the agency that they have is another word. And we've talked about these words a lot, but the idea, that agency word, is we're enabled, we're empowered to do things, to be part of things, to have a say, to make choices, to make decisions that actually impact and matter. These are these experiential things that matter a lot at camp, and a lot of this is at the heart of what you've been doing and what you've been talking about for a long time. Yeah, so go ahead and dive in. Share these connections. I know you're going to start to kind of bring that to camp, but keep going. Tell us
Right.
more.
Right. Thanks, Jared. Yeah, I've had opportunities to work with camps almost every year, camp staffs and things like that. But and sometimes week longs. A few years ago, not too long ago, I was working at Sugar Creek for a week. They invited me to come in and do a week long with some high school kids, and to do a lot of the peer ministry
Awesome.
skills within that. And it was a fun week. It was, I enjoyed it completely. At the end of the week, the camp director, Jesse, he says to me, he says, "Why are we not giving all of our campers some of these skills? Some of these just relational people skills?" And so we brainstormed on that and so created what I've just called people skills, just a set of kind of short teaching pieces of different ways to help
Mm-hmm.
people relate to people, right? And we decided that we weren't trying to rewrite a curriculum. We were just trying to create some pieces that could be woven in, that we could train camp staffs in to just weave in with their campers and teach a little piece about listening.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, just, how do you start a conversation, and welcoming? How do you welcome people in? And they're just practical ways. And it was interesting, Jared, because we wrote them really thinking about elementary kind of
Sure.
mindset
Yeah.
as we did that. Well, first year worked with a couple camps. Last year, I think we worked with 7 different camps, and looking forward to doing that again this summer. I think what was surprising with the camps that we worked with was not only, did it give opportunities for their staff to, like I said, weave in. We didn't expect them to do, I think
Mm-hmm.
we gave them like 9 or 10, we didn't expect them to do them all. It's like, choose them as they're appropriate, and do a couple. But the
Yeah.
surprise was, and from the program directors and camp directors, was they said, we really watched our staff taking these things on and doing
Mm.
these skills. One of them just as simple
Yeah.
as, I say, I call them say mores, and we have kind of a fun way of getting around that. But almost anytime anybody asks a question, there's more behind it, right? There's story behind it. And a lot of times, even in small groups or whatever, we ask a question, somebody answers it, and we go on to the next. There's a
Yeah.
bigger story there. And so we just taught campers to say,
So how to
"Hey,
peel that?
say more about that," and dig a little deeper. But they said that, gosh, they watched their staff doing that all the time, and just learning to go a little bit deeper,
Mm-hmm.
and allow kids to talk a little bit more. So yeah, some of those kinds of things.
Partway through last year, one of the things we've been hearing from from some camp was that parents, and they've got these key settings. The car ride home is one of them. Like, we know how important the car ride home from camp is,
Yeah, right.
and that time is really important. And so, but we had heard, that equipping some of those key times and those conversations in the week after are really vital for how things can get brought in, can get integrated into family life. So we put together this resource. And Kelsey was the one. Kelsey, who works with you, was the one who kind of, her and I worked together. She wrote a lot of that content,
Yeah.
but it's built just like that. It's making me laugh a little right now because it is built. We built for these parents. Here are some, here's some questions, and here's some go deeper questions, and here's
Yeah.
some go really deep questions, and
Yeah.
they're built in that peel it down, right? Peel it back layer. They're built in that say more kind of way. I appreciate that because that's not hard, right? That's not this incredible
No,
skill
right.
that you have to notice. It's 2 words. Say more about that, right? Say more. What a powerful, simple way to peel that back.
Even as a youth minister, for years, I'd watch kids come back from trips or camps or retreats and get picked up in the parking lot by parents. And what was the parents' question? It was the great American question. Was it fun?
You have fun?
And which I hope it was. I'm sure it
Great.
was. I mean, you're working
That's
with
a great
kids. Of
first
course it
question.
is. Yeah.
First
Yeah.
question.
Of course it is. But it's much deeper than that, and there's, so yeah, you're right. So one of the things as a youth minister I started doing was like, okay, everybody's here. Let's go into the sanctuary. Give me 5 minutes. Kids were still pumped up. They'd sing a song. Someone would talk about it. And we got to say just what your book is, on the way home, it was car talk, on the way home, talk
Car
about
talk.
this, ask this question. And so important to do. Yeah.
Okay. So you started, you're working with these camps. You've got kind of some of these, these foundational people skills things. And you were saying staff, campers, yes. It was kind of built for campers, but staff started to take those things on, bring them to camp, but hopefully take them home too. Okay.
Yeah.
Say more.
Yes, thank you.
I'm learning.
That's our niche in the world, right? Is just giving people these skills that connect, that allow them to go deeper with others. Peer ministry, we go crazy with that and in helping them, help their friends through all kinds of tough situations. And I think in the stuff we did, we talked about, just how do you listen to people with icks going on in their life, because everybody's got an ick, And sometimes it's the family stuff. Sometimes it's feeling like, you never are accepted. And just, allowing kids to talk about some of their icks and just being heard. One story that came back, for instance, was a program director ran into one of their campers and just told the program director, yeah, I'm trying to listen to my friends more now. That's the big win. Right. And I don't have the research.
Shame.
We'll have to hire Sacred Playgrounds to do that. But I don't have the
figure that out.
research to back all that up. But that's the hope, right? Is that something that you picked up, translates to real life. And that they start to view that as ministry, as part of their faith. And I love telling the story. I was working with a group of kids and they had done some of these skill things. And we asked them, how are you using these, outside of your church setting? Kind of quiet. I kept nudging, and finally this one little girl, she says, well, I don't think this counts, she says. Right? She says, I don't think this counts. I know, it's
good start. Because something that really counts is about to come up.
She said, Friday night, she said, I went out with my friend. Her parents are split up. I think they're getting a divorce. I haven't seen her for a while. I just thought it'd be good to go and hang out with her. And I was like, yeah, that counts.
Yes, that counts.
That's so cool. One by one, every kid in the room had something. I was like, there's this kid in my math class nobody talks to, but I always try to talk to him. And they went around the circle. My aha from that experience was like, oh my gosh, we have kids, adults. We have people doing ministry all the time. Maybe we just forgot to tell them it counts, because ministry is something you go to, something you sign up for, something you know.
Reach.
And so maybe part of our job, even at camp, is to help kids understand that, just those things of friendship, that thing of helping somebody just talk through a stress. And, you know, that's, I mean, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. No, you're right. Right. It doesn't.
I get to watch Jared here. He's kind of bubbling
You know,
over
you've
on
seen
this.
my reactions. Of course, I'm like, oh, those. They have to know that counts, right? They have to know that counts. That's what it actually is, right? That's walk through Scripture, walk with Jesus for a while. All of that is what actually counts, and I would say counts maybe even more from my limited little perspective. Counts even more than than these sort of big things, these often overly structured things, because if we don't do it one to one to group, if we don't do it in our relationships, I don't know. I guess
Yeah.
it seems
If
pretty
I
darn clear in Scripture. Yeah.
if I ask kids what leadership looks like in the church, they tend to give me, again, I'll let you guys do the research on it, but they tend to give me two images, either microphones or committees, right? Because that's the
Interesting.
visuals of leadership. If you're a leader, you're teaching or preaching or singing, or, not that that's bad, or you're on a committee and
Of
you're
course.
advocating, or, and again, we make a big deal about committees in the church. And so they see those roles, and I'm such an advocate to say those roles probably only exist, to help the real leadership model. And sometimes I use the woman at the well story, sitting by the well and hearing somebody's story, and just knowing somebody. I think living water for her that day was the fact that somebody knew her story,
True.
and maybe that's a better image of leadership, but we don't count that. So again, camp, oh my gosh, sitting by the campfire. I mean, you stare into the coals, you talk about anything and everything all night long, but there's just something
Okay.
about that.
So I want to dive into that in a second, into that idea of, and I guess it really will come out as kind of, if there's some camp leaders listening right now, what are some things they might be able to space they might be able to create, simple things they might be able to implement, and then of course we'll let you know if they want to dive deeper, connect with you more. I'll make you talk about the book here in a second. So I want to step aside for just a second with a curious question. Call it Quick Camp Question Part 2. Have you seen in the last 4.5 years, what have you noticed about the capacity, the ability of these young people who came through pandemic, who came through isolation, who came through a very different relationality than they were used to? Is it different? Is it different? Is their starting point different? You know what I mean? Like, are there skills? We feel like we've seen this in the research, but with such a hands-on way. I'm curious if the baseline has changed, if the starting point is different in these young people from a relationality and a capacity for this kind of thing. What have you seen there?
Right. I mean, the need is huge, right? And we keep hearing about uh, the, just the lack of connection with
Connection,
people,
ability to make relationships, ability to make friends,
and the
social skills,
stress
all that.
levels that are just kind of out of this world. Kids are hurting. I mean, we talk to teachers, right? And it's like they don't know how to relate to each other anymore, in a lot of situations. And
Yeah.
very dependent on on texting, on phone, kind of. But so, yeah, one of the things that I feel like we got to reteach people is just that heart to heart, face to face, person to person,
Mm.
contact, what that's like. So we work with peer ministers, and I'm very aware that if uh, um, if kids are recognizing things in their friends, it's probably via text messages. If I'm speaking with high school kids, I'll always ask, how many of you, well, I'll ask a lot of questions, how many of you are, somebody, right, whose parents are separated or divorced, kids are already, how many, drug, alcohol stuff. But I get down to the suicide question. How many of you are in conversation recently with somebody that's been thinking about suicide? Jared, it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
probably 90 to 100% sometimes of the hands go up. And even middle school kids, at least 50% of the hands go up. So they're talking about them. And where are they
So
finding
hard to
those
hear.
things out? Well, a lot of times it is on the phone and stuff. So we have to have those conversations. It's like, when do you got that information, what do you do with it? And when does it become a face-to-face, kind of thing? And who are the innkeepers from the Good Samaritan story? It was great. We're doing Good Samaritan story stuff. And one night, one kid goes, well, the innkeeper did all the work. It's like, yeah, they just get one mention, but they spend all the time bandaging and feeding and
Sure.
but so I love that image of who are the innkeepers that we go to, when do you go to the school counselor? When do you call, when do
Yeah.
and so, yeah, we have to
We've
talk
got
about those things.
that's some of that research that backs that up. I mean, that's backed up in camper research. It's really backed up in staff research, which has been some of the most interesting we've shared on here before. That we asked those questions in a couple of key summer staff surveys. I was just with some Episcopal friends last week, reading out some results from a study we had done with a bunch of Episcopal summer staff. And yeah, when you have lots of stats, you think something like 20, and it's 20 something percent. I didn't pull it up. I don't have it in front of me, but of those staff have contemplated self-harm in the last month.
Yeah.
And
right.
these are these people, right? We make all these assumptions about where our staff are, and I think that's something really interesting that camp leaders are learning. We had a good conversation about it. Is these our staff members, the people we're hiring to be leaders, they're struggling too.
Yeah.
They are struggling with their mental health, and big parts of the supports that need to happen are around that. So we need to stop making these assumptions that everybody has it all together. Of course, even if they are kind of signing up for camp staff, and even by the end of the summer, okay, great, it's all better, it's all figured out, we transformed everyone. No, they were still struggling. And the best part of all those stats was the way they reported the outcomes of their experience, even in the midst of those struggles, were, especially on things like support and community, were just as high or higher than those who hadn't reported mental health struggles. And that was really interesting. So yes, we're going through this stuff. It is part of who we are. And when we are able to go through that together in a way that is supportive, we're coming out of it feeling those important things, feeling that community, feeling that support, having built networks of people who ask us to say more and who dig deeper.
Yeah.
And
yeah, it goes back to that image of sitting by the well and knowing that somebody knows my story, and knows some of the icks in life as well as the joys.
Some of the icks. Yeah. So that brings to what we always try as we kind of move toward wrapping things up, to bring this to here's a thing or two to do if they're listening. And it feels already like we've hit on one of them for me, and you just talked about it again, is create space for staff to sit by the well together, and create space for campers to sit by the well together. Right? So we campfires were a good example. We program the snot out of our campfires usually. Right? Our campfires at most camps are, right, we do it. Like, I did this, music leading all the time. Okay, here's our campfire agenda.
Right. Yep.
Here's this thing. And
Yep.
how often do we go? And here's the time when we're going to be quiet. Or here's the time when we're going to ask a question for them to just contemplate together. We're going to do that. We sing the next song, and then we sing the next song, and then we do the skit, and then you know what I mean? So what are those times and spaces? That feels like an action step for me, is look for spaces that you can open up a sit by the well kind of conversation.
Yeah. So maybe we need mini campfires after the big campfire, or having a candle, and I always found that was kind of amazing. It's like, just sitting around a candle in the dark.
If you heard
and
that,
staring
that was
into
Lyle clicking his campfire, his light.
I just lit a candle, right?
Lit a candle.
Because it's here, right? That's I think that's been part of my goal. One of my goals in life is just get people to light a candle, whether it's family or camps or whatever. I've built whole youth ministries around that. Kids leading other kids in just conversations and leaning in, in the midst of the dark. And you're right, some silence. So giving space for that, right?
Create space for that.
And Jared, one of the things that always surprised me, just working methodology of peer ministry is we often learn a skill and then we practice the skill. And a lot of times that's in pairs. Just sitting one-on-one and going, oh, let's do this listening skill or this, piece together. And one of the things I always think of group building is having the whole group together. one of the things I've learned is just having people pair up and have conversations is an amazing group builder, and because they're more likely to share stories. So yeah, in camp, sit around a candle, or get your own little mini, campfire time, or just get your kids paired up and given them a meaningful conversation to have together is a cool way to do that. Also, I always encourage camp counselors or whoever, make sure you get your own one-on-one time somehow with every camper. Because again, I remember being a camp counselor, it's all about group building and let's do trust falls, let's do, let's do all kinds.
Next activity, next high energy thing,
Yep. And it's all good, all great. I love it. But the stuff that really gets remembered is those, heart to heart, one-on-one conversations, just to build in that kind of work.
I credit a conversation that I had with a guy who wasn't even actually my own counselor, but we just kind of had a connection that week, and sat out on the porch of the cabin when I was a 9th grader. And I credit that moment with knowing, I want to counsel. I want to be a counselor when the time comes.
Yeah.
Those summers have obviously, like, that just plain built the path for all of this in my life. And of course there were lots of moments, but that was absolutely a spark conversation.
Yeah.
All the way back.
Love it.
So creating space for that, and getting those one-on-one time. And I would even maybe take it a step further and say, don't save that for Thursday night, right? If you're a week-long program, we often have that stuff built into Thursday. Okay, let's try to pack in all of this incredible, important emotion on Thursday. Like, create space for that throughout the week. Yeah,
I love it.
All right, if you had another, kind of, hey, make sure to take this from here. Here's something you could go implement right now. Or is there a thing or two that would come to mind for those listening?
Well, if I can, I'll do the quick infomercial. It's time. Yeah, the people skills piece. Obviously, I can't be at everybody's staff training. I can get to a few because everybody seems to have them at the same time. So what we did last year was some Zoom trainings, mostly with program directors. Although I remember Flathead sent about 10 people, to a couple of the trainings, and that's fine.
That sounds like them.
Yeah, it was great. And thank you, Margie.
That's right.
But anyway, what we do then is try to equip you to equip your staff and to take these. And again, they're kind of simple, but they're kind of powerful too. But to take these people skills and just start teaching your staff and encouraging them to use them. And then I think the program people and directors, your job is to just keep reminding them through the year to keep using them and to introduce them to your campers. So there's so many good things that happen at camp, and it's hard to pack in one more thing. But in some ways, you can take 5 minutes and implement these. I think one of the things I'm most proud of, we're very good. I'm bragging. We're very good at creating these ways to get at these skills. We have fun doing it, and some very creative methods of doing that. And then, a little bit of time for your campers to practice, and then keep reminding them. So yeah, that's what we're doing.
Where do they, so
Peer
if they want to dig in?
Peerministry.org is the website.
Head to the website
and not a lot on there about camps, but go to the bottom of any page and fill in and it's going to come to me. So fill in that you're interested or want to know more. We'll find a little time to talk and explain more about it and go from there. So love to have you. Talk about character development. It's like, I hear that and I go, that's what we do. We're developing that. Yeah. So hoping to weave in some camps, on some of the ACA grants and stuff too. I'd love to do that.
That was the last episode. We talked about, a little bit those grants and the idea of character at camp. And yeah. So this is really timely to your point.
Yeah.
We know that's an important what. We know how connected it is to our why. And this might be the right way to enable the how. How does that actually happen? Because we talked about that. That was one of our big takeaways that was look through your staff training schedule and look through your camp activities and label it, name the character skills that you're building through this experience and that experience. And enabling the how do we get there here, I think is really valuable.
Yeah. So,
all right.
Yep, all those
Go ahead.
things. So listening and helping and welcoming and empathy skills and dealing with feelings, all that stuff. That's what we're working on.
We know we have a handful of folks who like to read, and we share book recommendations on the regular. So, I feel like there's a book or something on this. You should see the camera zoomed in, everybody who's listening. I'll make sure to video clip that one. So, I if they're a reader and I want to read through what's underneath all this, Lyle,
Oh,
tell
my
us about the book
goodness.
quick.
Youth are either leading or they're leaving. And it was a book. And so the real question is that's the case, and a lot of evidence that that is the case. How are kids being invited to lead? How are they being said? And my experience is the kids that are staying in their churches, right, are kids that hear the words, I need you. And I need you. Every kid in every church needs to hear, whether active or semi-active or haven't been seen for a long time, just needs to hear the words, I need you, at least twice a year. And it has to be for something that's meaningful and important to them. And the reality is, oftentimes they show up, especially when it's a heartfelt, we need you. And oh my gosh, camp, it's not a top-down thing.
It's such a good space for that.
It's a place for every camper to go, oh, you're needed. Hey, I need you to do that, and just one by one, that message of you're needed here. You're needed for this group. You're needed to make this happen. You've got these skills. I think so much of the camp counseling job is to see things in kids and draw it out, and make it happen for them. So anyway,
I think you're right, and
I could do another hour on that, or 2 or 3, but yeah, thank you for letting me talk about that. So again, peerministry.org, you can go and it'll lead you to Book Baby.
Find that too.
You can find it on Amazon also, but they don't give their authors hardly anything. Book Baby does.
We'll get those linked in the show notes for this
Fantastic.
episode. So we'll have those. We'll
All
put
right.
some
All right.
pop some direct links there. All right, my friend. Thank you. Grateful
Thank you.
for this chat. Before we go, Jake's gonna hop in and help us with our stat of the week.
Stat of the week. Stat of the week. Stat of the week.
Hey, Jake. I've been chatting with Lyle. Thanks for hopping on and giving us our stat of the week this week.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to hear Lyle's voice and get some of his wisdom. So our stat of the week this week is an odds ratio, okay? And so it's twice
fun.
as likely. Twice as likely, all right? Campers who say about their camp experience that they often or always felt like they had a say in their camp experience and that their input mattered were more than twice as likely to show measured growth in self-confidence than the campers who said that happened rarely or not at all. So this is a big deal. This is part of our participatory measurement. So when we measure the camp experience, we're measuring the 5 fundamentals, and participatory is one of those fundamentals of camp. And this is one of the key metrics of whether the campers found the experience to be participatory or not, if they had a say in their experience, if their input mattered. And if they said often or always to that, they were very likely to grow in self-confidence. In fact, if we just look at those campers, which was 79% of campers in 2024 said often or always to that statement, they showed statistically significant growth in self-confidence and in the faith relevance measurement. Those who said rarely or not at all to that, it was 8% of the campers, so less than 1 in 10 of them said this. They showed no growth in either of those measurements. In fact, they showed a little bit of a decline in self-confidence at the end of the camp experience. So this is really important, and this is a key part of the camp experience, and we can see that it also matters to the camper outcomes, that the campers have a say and that they're involved.
That matters so much, and connects with what Lyle is saying. When campers are they're participating. This is an experiential thing. When campers, and true for staff too, when they're participating, when they have that say, when they have that agency. That's the word we've used a handful of times. It's just great to know that when we create the space, like Lyle and I were just talking about, when we create the space for them to do that, to connect, to participate, to have a say, it makes a difference for what we're after. That's huge. Thanks, Jake.
Absolutely. Awesome to hear from Lyle. And remember, ask that question, can a camper do this? Because the answer is often yes. Give them that agency.
Yeah, Thanks, Jake. Lyle, thank you again. I appreciate this conversation. Yeah, reach out, folks. Peerministry.org. Connect with us. We can connect you with Lyle if you want to either plug in some staff training, read a book, ask some questions, get curious about this. It was clear to me, Lyle, the applications for how we might train some staff and enable some campers. Camp is a really good place to explore these things, to try these things out, and a good catalyst for bringing them then home to school and to church and all these other places. So,
yay!
Great for you, my friend, and the work you do. Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast.
Hey, camp friends. The Sacred Playgrounds team is committed to keeping our podcast free because we believe that the impacts and stories of camp should be shared far and wide, but it isn't free to produce. We keep everything in-house, but even so, each episode costs us about $450 to produce. If you find these conversations, quick camp questions, and stats helpful in your ministry, consider buying the team a cup of coffee. We use the Ko-fi platform to accept your one-time and recurring offers of support. ko-fi.com/sacredplaygrounds. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Sacred Playgrounds podcast. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/sacredplaygrounds or at Sacred Playgrounds on Instagram. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you're getting this podcast. And if you like this content and it's helpful, you can support the podcast by clicking that support button. Our theme music was written and performed by Taylor Wilson. You can find all his original songs wherever you get your music. Learn more about what we're up to and connect with the team at sacredplaygrounds.com.